Have anything to add?
Community grant for Nikhil.
Grant. And that would be, it's a community grant, right, under 11.3. What's that? Just lost my, there. Where is my agenda? My agenda just disappeared. There. Okay, if no other additions, motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded, carried. Any conflict of interest on any of the items? Hearing none, we'll continue to number 3, which is a presentation. And we have from the RCMP with an update, we have Staff Sergeant Ben Parry. You're on.
Thanks for having me. I handed out, it's a brief report that summarizes what we've had between May 1st and August 31st of this year, and compared it to that same time period last year, just to give an overall snapshot of the occurrences that have been happening in the municipality. And this is broken down just for the municipality, not for the county. So generally, across the board, we're seeing lower numbers in most of our areas. We have a few one-offs. Obviously, we had a robbery. That was, we don't see very many of those. So, one robbery in this period versus 0 last year. Otherwise, we're really seeing a lot of drops. We've got a higher number of breaches of court order, but again, we're not looking at a large total. We're looking at a population of 4 versus 1 last year. So that's just a function of who do we have in jail, who do we have out of jail, and who's currently on conditions. So you can't really predict where you are in that cycle at any given time. But given that our baseline numbers are pretty close to the same, plus or minus, a small percentage. Overall, 144 occurrences. And that includes everything from your highest end occurrences right down to your traffic violations. So that's down 50 from last year. That to me, I think we are at that point where we have a lot of our prolific offenders either on conditions or in custody or just basically taking a time out from committing crimes. And that shows with our founded and SUI occurrences. So SUI is still under investigation, and founded are obviously things that have been reported to us that we can determine actually happened, as opposed to unfounded occurrences we get where someone will report a theft, and then later it's determined that it wasn't a theft, it was their son had come and borrowed the chainsaw or something along those lines. As you can imagine, we do get some of those. So that's where the disparity between 144 occurrences and 117 founded comes in. But the drop is very similar. 44 founded occurrences versus 50 total occurrences. Otherwise, we have seen a decrease in our traffic numbers, our speeding especially. I can say firsthand that I spend a lot of time out on the road and the offenders just aren't there. So I think whatever we've done in terms of our focus patrols, certainly covering off the school areas towards the end of the year, and we picked that up again this year, I think that had a real effect, and that's driven the numbers down significantly from last year. We're down 22 as opposed to this time last year. Otherwise, You know, this is, these are easy reports to give because there's not a lot of bad news in them. And anytime we see, you know, numbers of crimes going down, that means that whatever we're doing proactively, being it our checks on prolific offenders, our curfew and condition checks, right down to proactive patrols in areas where we've seen lots of traffic issues. That visibility is having an effect, and it's driving our overall numbers down. So otherwise, just not on a report. I'm sure some of you are aware that we've finally got a full-time person back in our school safety position. Mario Goujon, we picked up from Metagan. So he's come on board. He's taken place of Mario Ross, who retired. And Mario's been into the schools quite a bit lately. I know they're really happy to have him. And he's actually done some presentations for the senior safety coordinators at the same time. Slightly off mandate, but really he's the one with the biggest grasp of the community policing issues. And who better to talk to seniors about things like cyber safety, the various frauds that are going around. They change every day, but there's no shortage of them. And we're trying to get that out as well, just to be a little proactive. So, take any questions.
Anybody have any questions?
The only thing I was gonna mention, I don't know if you can mention it too, used to be Department of Highways, Transport and Infrastructure Renewal there now. The school sign on the southern side of the school in West Pubnico is gone, it's missing. And there's people that, especially if they're not from the area, they'll come up and drive right along at 60 kilometers an hour, not knowing that they're in the school area. So really, it's not their fault if, you know, if they get stopped, it's because they have no idea they're in the school area. I put in a report about it. I see the sign is still has not been put up, but I was just wondering if you could talk to anyone and maybe
That's the first
mention
I've heard of it, but I'll definitely make a note of it, and
Thank you.
we'll try and reach out, because we don't, the sign's not there to benefit us,
Yeah,
right?
no.
The sign's there to keep the kids safe,
Exactly.
and that's what we want to make sure. If it's missing, that's critical that we get that back up, and whoever I can talk to, I can't guarantee that they'll take my word as direction, but hopefully they get it back up quickly.
Thank you very much.
Couple comments. I have to say that we are not seeing nearly as many off-road vehicles on the road lately as we used to earlier in the summer. So whatever you've done there has been in the positive. And another thing, you got speeding violation. I'd like to see one there that says under speeding violation.
Well, those are hard to track because we all see those people. It's funny, we love to joke about it. We see them on the highway and they're doing 80, and I stop them all the time. But for the most part, we're not going to write a ticket to, you know, it's generally our older people who are driving along for whatever reason. And usually I'll just direct them, you know, if they would like to take a scenic route. The Highway 3 is a great choice, but
No,
yeah.
I was just gonna mention, and Junior can attest to this, like I drive big, heavy trucks, and when you get behind an 80 clicker, you're not gonna pass it because there's not enough room to pass it. So traffic builds up behind me, and what I see and what he sees, people doing, trying to get by us, is dangerous, and it's all because of the 80, 85 clicker in
And
front of us.
you're absolutely right. It doesn't take too many cars behind a slow driver before all of a sudden you've got something really hard to pass. And people will pull out and they'll do what my brother likes to call a Superman pass. We don't have the passing areas for it, especially that last 20 clicks into Yarmouth is not made for making time.
No.
Unfortunately. So, no, that's a good point, and there's no reason we can't maybe do a little bit more enforcement on that, or just education.
Yeah.
to get them to pick it up just a little bit. You know, no one wants to see anyone speeding, but there's no reason to be 20 under. You're absolutely right.
So how much lower is acceptable? Like, if you drive 95, it's fine. If you drive 80, then you're starting to get into the too slow for a highway of that caliber.
And that's really where you run into one of those judgment calls. You know,
Yes.
given the nature of the road, you'd expect people to be moving along at 100.
Yes.
But, you know, then we get into if there's weather, and I know there doesn't always have to be weather for some people to drive
No.
85 on the 103. But you do get right into driver comfort a lot of time. And, you know, our older population, oftentimes they're not as comfortable driving at 100 anymore. And some drivers, it's, you know, as much as they can be a problem driving at 80, they can be a real hazard driving at 100. So from our seat out in the car, we have to balance, you know, action we're taking with these people versus, you know, potentially pushing them in the opposite direction, because no one wants to see that.
No. Any more questions? Any more questions?
Not a question, just a comment. You and I have had a very brief correspondence by email one maybe a year ago now. We were concerned with, it was a certain time of day, speeding with people going to work with large businesses in the Wedgeport area. And there's a condensed area where a lot of children were waiting for the bus at the same time. And I just want to tip, it's just a comment, not a question. Just want to tip my hat to you. You responded right away, implemented a plan, and pretty well cured the problem. And I just have to tip my hat. It was much appreciated, and the residents appreciated it as well.
Thanks. You know, I put that out to the members, and I adjusted the schedule and said, you know, can we spend time out there? And really, it's to their credit. I took the information from you and I passed it to them, and they really picked it up. And we've tried to do that with problem areas around the county. So if people are coming to the councillors or anyone and saying, gosh, people are driving too fast on whatever stretch of road, it's nothing for us to go out for 2 weeks. I believe we didn't even, you know, we were coming up on the end of school, I think, when we first discussed that. I think we spent maybe 10 days out there, and it was, well, as you say, that was over a year ago, and it was a huge difference.
Major difference.
Yeah. So a little bit of focused attention can really have a long-term effect. And there's nothing saying in 6 months we don't go back somewhere and focus on it. But if we cure the problem, then we can move on to other problem areas, because there certainly are some. Everyone knows of those areas. So I just encourage anyone, if you're hearing about it, or if people are complaining, either have them contact us or contact me yourselves.
Anybody else? Councillor Don.
I guess the ATVs were mentioned. My district is in Lower West Pubnico, and they're still on the road. The funny thing is, or maybe not the funny thing is, but it just goes from generation to generation. I was one of those generations, you know, probably 35 years ago. And then my son was probably one of those generations a few years ago. And now, you know, but I don't know how we would, I guess, stop that culture.
You used exactly the right word. It's culture. And I grew up in the north, so where it wasn't ATVs, it was snowmobiles. And for us, I hate saying when I was a kid, because I don't feel like I'm old enough to say that. But when I was a kid, there was no issue with driving down city streets in Yellowknife. You know, not the main drag. That was sort of the one concession that they had us make, but we went everywhere. And the rules really changed, and there were always those holdouts who didn't want to conform to the rules. But I think if we, you know, this adult generation is modeling the behavior we want to see from the kids, it will take time. It's not going to happen in 6 months that we'll have a little more respect for that. But you also see movement from the other side. TIR has a pilot project, unfortunately not in our area, but in several areas around the province where they're basically going to be trying out a two wheels on the pavement approach. Which I, you know, again, growing up in the north, that's just a way of life, was getting around on ATVs and snowmobiles. And I think as long as people are reasonable, no one's ever going to complain about someone going a half a mile from front of their house to a trail. You know, we certainly don't want people on the far side, every time they see the police and they're doing something like that, then they take off. We don't want to see that, because that just, as we saw in, I believe, your area, we ended up with 2 guys pretty badly hurt, and you know, for no good reason. We don't want to see that. We want to make everything safer. So I'm optimistic with the pilot project. I want to see how it goes, what they learn from those areas. Hopefully, you know, maybe they roll it out to more parts of the province. Maybe they make it province-wide if it goes well. But that's the province moving halfway, and I think if we, you know, we don't condone it. We don't, you know, when we have these young guys bragging it up on Facebook that they're doing whatever, you know, we have to take a stand and say, no, you're not as cool as you might think you are. Because really, when we're 20, we're pretty well the coolest thing ever. Everyone knows that. But we get a little older, we realize the error of our ways. So we can slowly impart a bit of that wisdom on younger people. And, you know, the province moves a little bit and we move a little bit. I think that'll increase the overall safety.
And another question, as I'm looking through the numbers, was the economy. How does the economy affect crime? I'm assuming that you know, the more work there is, and the less crime there would be, because people work and make money.
That tends to be sort of the anecdotal evidence. Is if people are working, they don't have the time to get up to mischief, and you know, life is good, so you're less likely to be forced into those choices by economics. Now, the far side of that is you get people who have lots of money, and that increases obviously their disposable income, you know, different forms of recreation they can take up. You see more big trucks, more ATVs, more beer, more cocaine. You know, we know this. When some people are making more money, they're going to spend it on perhaps not the best choices, and you start seeing that, and then, you know, somebody, you know, more booze will increase your domestic assaults, your impaired driving, your fatals, you know, and those are things we don't want to see. So it's not something that I've ever seen hard and fast numbers on, but, you know, generally certainly when the guys are busy, you know, once lobstering starts, roll up the sidewalks, right? People are working and people have got things to do. And when guys are off in the summer, they have more time for recreation. How they choose to do that, hopefully, is not destructive, but some people aren't always going to make the right choices.
Thank you.
I have an issue with people texting.
I do too.
I can say 1 out of 3 are texting, because every time you go by a vehicle, their head's down.
And you know, that's one of our major provincially mandated, and you know, it's near to my heart because I ride a motorcycle, so it's not just a function of maybe getting a dent in my fender. Somebody texting or playing around with their phone, yeah, it could easily kill me. So I got a soft spot for motorcyclists, obviously, and I want to keep everybody safe. And you know, it's one of those things. I see it a lot when I'm not working, and it drives me mad.
Yeah,
I've
met vehicles coming on my side.
Oh.
Coming home from work, and they're, you know, people are going back at a busy time, and they're all texting well.
You're absolutely right, and you know, I've thought to myself, I see these people all the time on the 103 when I'm going home from work, so I'll go out and drive around in an unmarked car during the day on the 103. But it's like anything else, when you're looking for it, it always seems hard to find. But my approach to distracted driving and my direction to my members is that's to be zero tolerance. Unless you are phoning 911 because you are reporting something happening in front of you right now, better have your phone down. It's just only safe. So that's one we're really focusing on. It's just catching them. You know, we only have so many people, so many hours in the day, and can only be so many places at once. But I completely agree with you. It's something we need to work on. It's something I'd like to see more education about in schools too, but I only control a very small part of the universe.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else? I have just a question about, okay, with the legalization of marijuana coming up, do you anticipate having to have more staff on the force? Do you think that?
Well, with any good police officer, you don't have the angel and the devil on your shoulder, but you have the optimist and you have a pessimist. And the optimist on my shoulder tries to say, I don't think we'll see that big an increase in incidents, you know.
Okay.
I don't think we'll see an increase in violent crime. I don't think we'll see an increase in domestic assaults. But the pessimist on my shoulder says, what about your drug impaired drivers? And honestly, I can't give an answer about whether or not we would need more people. I'm all for more people. I would, you know, it's always nice to have more than you need. Many hands make light work, but I just can't say one way or the other whether that particular change is going to significantly impact our crime trends. You know, yes, it's been illegal, but that doesn't seem to have stopped a lot of people. So I don't know what the difference in usage will be once legalization comes in. But my main concern is drug impaired drivers, because there'll be a lot of people, again, the pessimist on my shoulder says there are going to be a lot of people who are new to using the drug, and they're going to drive. And they don't know what their body's going to do. And I'm just hoping that the education that's coming out now, that we're trying to hammer home, just don't drive impaired on anything. I hope it sinks in. You know, the 80s, I'm not real old, but I remember the 80s, and no one thought anything about driving impaired. And that culture changed, thankfully. But I'm just hoping we're near the crest of the wave with the culture change for cannabis.
Okay, good. Okay, if there's no more questions, no more. I want to thank you very much for the report. Very, very interesting and nice comments and whatever. So thanks again
Thanks for having me. And again, if anyone ever has any concerns or just wants to stop by and talk about something, give me a call, stop by the office. Love to sit down with people. It's the only way I know what's going on.
Sure.
There are that many more sets of eyes around the table, so feel free to come and see me.
Good enough. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, one thing I neglected to say at the beginning is we've had a regret from Councillor Surratt. Okay, the next item is for our consolidated and non-consolidated financial statements. We're going to move that ahead of on the agenda. So you're on, Gloria.
Great, thank you very much. So I met with your audit committee this afternoon, and we went over the detailed explanation for your non-consolidated financial statements and the consolidated as well. I'm only going to present the consolidated tonight because this is the actual audit, and that's what you need to approve. The non-consolidated are developed more for management's use than for the general public. So I'm just going to go, everybody should have a copy of the financial statement. I'm going to go right directly to page 1, which is the independent auditor's report. So it's laid out in terms of responsibility. Paragraph 1 is the introduction. So they are the consolidated financial statements for the municipality of Argyle for March 31st, 2018. Paragraph 2, it outlines that they are management's responsibility to prepare the financial information as well as to set a system of internal controls as they feel is appropriate throughout the year to make sure they can accumulate the financial information and that it would be free from what we call material misstatement. As your auditors, it's our responsibility to be able to give you an opinion at the end of the day on the results of these financial information. Again, we also want to make sure that the statements are free of material misstatement. And we plan and execute our audit focused on areas of highest risk, because that's where we're looking for where there be discrepancies. We have to make sure that we look at your accounting policies to make sure they're appropriate in the circumstances, and any estimates made by management we need to review as well. So the very last paragraph is our opinion that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the consolidated financial position of the municipality of the District of Argyll as at March 31st, 2018, the results of its operations, changes in its net financial assets and cash flow for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards, and that's the framework that you fall under. And you can see that they are dated today, which would be the day that Council will accept these financial statements. Page 2 is management's responsibility for this financial statement. So that is signed by your warden and your CAO. So page 3, so what we have to remember is what's included in here is the operations of the municipality of the District of Argyll, including their reserves, as well as their share of the operations of any of the entities that you control, which include the Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission, the Yarmouth International Airport Corporation, the Yarmouth County Solid Waste Management Authority, the Yarmouth and Acadian Shores Tourist Association, and based on your representative share of the operations of those organizations are included in this report. So you can say that page 3 is the statement of operations. So these are the revenues and the expenditures. You can see that there's a budget column. So that's the plan that was set at the beginning of the year of how you felt each of these organizations was going to operate through the year. Actual for 2018 and actual for 2017. So in terms of revenue, the original budget was set at $8,338,497, and the actual results for 2018 came in at $8,890,760, and the prior year was $7,156,049. So you can see that you actually are ahead of your budget for the year by $552,000, and your revenues are up by $1.7 million over the prior year. So there's several items that are up and down. It just depends on how the results are for the year. But you can actually see that your taxes were up during the year, and that's not because of rates, that's because assessments would have gone up during the year. As well, your deed transfer tax was a little bit higher this year than it was last year. That's an item that's a little bit harder to predict because it just depends on what happens in your local areas. So the area where you can see the highest increase is what we call other revenue from owned sources, and that would include the revenues of the operations of the Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission, and the big project that they undertook this year was the destruction of the Dominion Textiles facility. So they would have got funding from 3 different parties, so your share of their revenue, of course, would be higher this year than it would have been in the prior years. As well, conditional transfers from federal and provincial governments, you can see that your budget was very close to your actual, but it is quite a bit higher than the prior year. So when you get a capital grant to do a project, that's considered revenue in the year that you receive it, even though you're buying a capital asset with it. So this year, you actually had funding for the Wedgeport Sewer project that you undertook. So there was an extra $580,000 worth of income that came into that category. So that explains the differences in your revenues. On the expenditure side, you can see that your original budget was set at $8,865,295. Your actual came in at $9,034,434, and prior year was $6,888,393. So in terms of comparison of your budget to your actual, you're ahead of your budget. You've spent a little bit more than you planned by $169,000. That's actually a very small number on almost a $10 million budget, so that's very close actual. But compared to last year, you're up about $2 million. And again, the most of it was because of the expenditures related to the Dominion Textiles facility being torn down that came through the Yarmouth Area Industrial Commission, your share of those expenses. So your annual deficit for the year, you had planned to have a shortfall of $526,798. Your actual is $143,674. So you performed better than you expected. Last year, you did actually have a small surplus of $267,656. So of course, because of those additional expenditures this year, you have a little bit of a shortfall. There was a small gain on disposal of a capital asset, and so your net for the year is $129,449 in a shortfall. So you had an accumulated surplus at the beginning of the year of $20,194,415. So at the end of this year, your total accumulated surplus is $20,064,966. And if we turn the page onto page 4, you can see that same number at the bottom. So they agree between your income statement or your statement of operations and your statement of financial position. So your statement of financial position is made up of all of your assets and all of your liabilities. It's broken down. The top half is what we call financial assets, those assets that are readily convertible to cash. And you can see the greatest portion of your financial assets would actually rest in your cash balances. You have restricted and unrestricted cash. And then you have receivables. So your total assets are $9,987,776. Your financial liabilities, so that's all of your liabilities, are $3,383,466. And you can see that the biggest item in your liabilities is what we call deferred revenue. So that's cash that you've already actually received, which you will spend in the future on approved capital projects. So that comes through your gas tax money. So they give it to you, but you can only spend it on gas tax or on projects that they feel are appropriate under the circumstances. And so that is actually your cash that you already have that you get to spend in the future. So you have a net financial asset position of $6,604,310. And you can see it has gone down from the prior year, but you have purchased assets during the year and you did spend over $1 million in your contribution towards the Dominion Textiles tear down. So that's the reason why that's come down. But being in a positive balance, from a public sector accounting standards perspective, that's a very positive position to be in, to have a positive balance as your net assets. Then below that, we call them non-financial assets. So that's your building and all your equipment, because you're not going to sell those to pay off your liabilities. So it's non-financial, goes below. You have your, what we call your tangible capital assets, and the net book value of those assets is $13,422,746. That's the original cost of what you paid for them, less their amortization, which is a recognition that all assets age over time. And so you actually spent $1.4 million this year in new capital expenditures, the biggest one being the Wedgeport sewer system. Then there's a small amount of prepaid expenses, and so your total non-financial assets are $13,460,656. And so of your accumulated surplus, that $13,460,000, which is almost 70% of your accumulated surplus, is you investing in capital. That's not just items that are laying around cash to be spent. That's what you've invested in your capital over time. So those are the two main pages. The rest are supporting notes and schedules, which I've already gone over with your audit committee, so I thought I'd just do a high level on those two pages, if that's okay. If you have any questions, please feel free.
Any questions? That was easy, no questions.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So do we have to approve that at this point?
We, typically the motion is to accept.
To accept, yes.
Accept the audited financials, the consolidated.
And we do it now?
Yes, if
Yeah.
you're prepared to.
Yes.
I'll make the motion to accept the financial statements.
Seconded? Moved and seconded? There's no questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, which is Council Priorities Progress Report. And there's only a couple that have really moved. East Pimlico Water Utility and the dangerous and unsightly premises. The rest are pretty much where we were. Nothing has moved
Yes.
since the last meeting, really.
Yes, because the tender was delayed for the.
That's right.
For the
For the building.
building, and, that will move considerably once the tender
That's right.
closes, which right now is, I believe, it's the 12th of October.
October, so it's been moved again and,
It's
because
it's
it was
extended
supposed.
2 weeks.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and the purpose is The reason is quite simple, we made a significant change to.
Right, to the roof and
To the
whatever.
roof and to council chamber.
Yes.
Or whatever the name of that building.
Yeah.
Great.
The Great Hall,
The
the
Great
excellent hall, the exquisite hall, the compass room.
Yeah.
We've named it 85 things, but ultimately that's where you're gonna meet twice a month.
Yeah,
Whatever we call it.
Exactly,
So it's
that's right.
significantly simplified,
Yeah.
from a cost perspective as well, it's significantly less.
Okay,
We felt the need to do that.
so any questions? Go ahead,
I have a
Councillor Gore.
question on the water tanks on Willett Road. I was asked this weekend, what is going on? Are we looking to replace that tank, or are we gonna, what exactly? I was just wanting to make it clear to what was going on with the tank.
Sure, so the last time we met with the users of the East Pubnico Water Utility, we told them we had two major projects that we would undertake. The first, which would be this year, would be the pump station, the pump upgrades to the wells themselves. Some of the equipment and the associated pumps, et cetera, were well beyond their useful life. So we're gonna use the current year operating funds to pay for the vast majority of that. We're gonna dip slightly into the accumulated surplus and that has obviously accumulated over time because we didn't spend that money yet. The plan, the long-term plan, we're hoping for next year would be for the replacement of that tank. We still haven't identified the appropriate size. We started with a smaller size and the users insisted it should be bigger, and that's okay. So we're just trying to, currently we're in the process of applying for funds to help us. We have received word from ACOA that it would probably get through the first round. In other words, the concept paper was accepted with some amendments. That doesn't mean we'll get funding, but it means at least it qualify for that funding, provided that we get selected. So that's where we are with that project. So we're gonna spend about $50,000 this year. That project will be closer to $800,000. And so we need to sit with the users and try to work out what that might mean for everybody. So we're still in the process of building the budget on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we don't need anything on that anyway. So number 5, financial report. And that's you, Marcia?
Right, so attached is the financial report to August 31st, 2018, showing a surplus of $85,828. Some of the larger variances in the revenues on page 1 are the deed transfer tax, which the actual is under budget, probably for the first time ever, of just over $9,000. Those numbers are kind of hard to budget. We kind of go from last year's variances and stuff like that, so we're hoping that one may change throughout the year. Revenue of owned sources is slightly higher than budget, mainly in building permits and recreation program revenue. At the bottom of the page, you'll see that the conditional transfers from provincial government is showing under budget by just a little over $4,100. This is funding that the Recreation Department applied for one of their programs, but had not received approval until this week. On page 2 in the expenditures, general government services is showing a savings, which mostly all of it is due to timing and staff trying to cut costs where possible. Most of the protective services savings thus far is under fire protection, the firefighter training, which has not all yet been completed, and property inspection, which the bulk of that savings is repairs that have not been completed, and fire inspection services. Environmental health has some savings in the West Pubnico sewer, which is mainly the sludge removal. Garbage collection and disposal is showing savings in landfill costs and special garbage pickup, which the fall pickup is scheduled for this October. And lastly, under recreation and cultural services, you see a savings of over $14,000, which is over half of it is the repairs to capital projects. There was an amount of money budgeted this year for the repair of the East Kemp ball field. Speaking with the Director of Programming and Active Living, She advised me that that may not happen this year. Maybe get done next year. So if there's anything else, any other questions?
Questions?
The only thing I'd like to say, that lady was just here as an auditor, and that she said we're very lucky as a municipality to have you. Because she said whenever she walks in and asks for stuff, Marcia's got the answers there for her. And I just feel as though if you're doing good, you should know you're doing good. And the people up there should know you're doing good.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Anybody else with questions? So we need a motion to accept
So,
the financial statement as presented.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Counter-minded? Carried. Strategic priorities, there's nothing under that. Now we're in number 7 for decision. Private road naming policy. This is our second reading, right?
You have had notice.
We've had
So you can
notice.
pass this today if you wish.
Yes, exactly.
So moved.
second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions, comments?
Question.
Question called for. All in favor, signify by saying
Aye.
aye. Contraminded, nay. Carried. Fall grants to organizations. That's your recommendations there. We only had 4 applications for about half of what or even less than half of what we have allotted. And I see that the recommendations are to allot the amounts that were applied for, that were asked. So we can do this in one motion
Make
for
a vote,
further.
I'd like to make the motion that we accept all the,
Okay,
all.
seconder?
Second.
Okay, any questions? No questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Contraminded? Carried. And there goes my, intermunicipal agreement planning services. Attachment there. So,
Who come up with the draft?
Myself with solicitor A.
Because it's stuff I don't really understand, so,
That's probably not good.
no.
now's the time to ask, now's the time to ask the questions.
There's a lot of legal talk in here, and I just wonder,
Yeah.
so is it, I guess my question is it much different than what we already have in place?
So what this is basically the elimination of the district planning commission. So there's no need to have a separate organization do planning services. Right now, planning services, as it stands today, we have a GIS technician. Our senior planner is, he's on leave for vacation, but will be retiring after his leave. So this agreement really is short-term. The first step is to establish that Alex will be a shared person, that it will be an employee of the municipality of Argyle, and shared 50% with the municipality of Yarmouth, and they'll pay 50% of the costs associated with GIS. And they will pay for 50% of the costs of the senior planner until such time as he officially retires. So the question is what are we gonna do for planning services in the future? That's yet to be determined. Right now, we are approaching the town of Yarmouth, who has a leave of their own for their current planning officer or planning person. So they have engaged a third party to do that work for them. So it's possible that they will do work, that he could do some work for us if need be. So we do have a pretty big job to do that may require a senior planner to assist us in doing that. That would be the passing of our land use bylaw and municipal planning strategy amendments. Brad has done that work, it's ready to go. We just need to go out to the public to do the engagement, so we will handle that. Basically, what this agreement also says is that there's nothing that obligates the municipality of Argyle or Yarmouth to continue sharing the senior planner in the same way that it did before. traditionally, the senior planning position was a one-third share with Barrington. So I think the smart thing to do would be to find a short-term solution, because our requirement for that service isn't high. And then we look broader to the county or even beyond the county to see if we can collectively obtain that service. Because Argyle, for instance, wouldn't require a lot of planning time. It requires a lot of GIS planning time, but we don't have a lot of development agreements or changes to land use bylaws that require a constant review of our documents. So all this intermunicipal agreement says is basically we will provide that service and they'll pay us half for it, and it will allow us to dissolve the district planning commission as an organization.
Okay, so when you're saying, okay, this is a draft, they've seen the plan, they've agreed to this as well, or we don't know?
The municipality of Yarmouth has approved this.
Oh, they already have approved
Conditional on
this?
us approving it. Once this is approved, the draft will come off and we'll sign it and we'll
Okay,
move forward.
okay. Any
So
more?
moved.
Second.
No more questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Unminded, carried.
And that's how the district planning commission dissolves.
Yes.
Whisper.
With a whisper. Tax exemption bylaw list amendment.
Do you want to take this, Mr. Clerk, or no?
I can. Attached to the agenda is Schedule A of Bylaw 28, which is the tax exemption bylaw. This is a list that outlines all of the charitable or not-for-profit organizations that receive either full 100% or partial tax exemptions. You might remember the most recent one we added to this list was McKill for Special Care in the last 2 years. So the municipal units who are part of the Industrial Commission suggested to make the paying of municipal property taxes more efficient. They decided to recommend that all properties owned by them, since it's owned by more than 2 municipal units, be exempt. So instead of paying it and then receiving it back, we just decided to exempt each property that is within our municipal boundaries that are part of the Industrial Commission. The medical clinic, for example, being ours. Others have more, but for us it's only the medical clinic. So you'll see that it's listed Yarmouth and Area Industrial Commission because that's the owner of the building and the address. So this will mean that that property will receive 100% exemption from property taxes. For more financial in-depth information, I would throw the ball back into the CEO's court. One other thing though, in the clerk's point of view, you can amend the list of the bylaw by policy. If we were to amend the bylaw, we'd have to go through the whole process. But just amending the list, you can just do it
Okay.
by motion.
And then the partial exemption, of course, they apply every year. It's not something, yes, they have to apply.
That's how that's set up.
Okay, any questions?
Just 2 quick comments. One is we are required with this bylaw to present this list to you every year.
Okay,
So the only change to this list outside of the one that we will be presenting
Is the Yarmouth
tonight
area.
is the Nikhil request.
okay,
So the Nikhil will
yes,
come up before December, typically they ask
Right.
for us to continue the partial request. But this list we'll only be making the amendment based on what you guys are,
Okay.
what council wishes to do
Mhm.
with that partial exemption. The only other comment I'd make is this is one of many properties that we're doing this to. So the airport, for instance, will also, because the airport isn't part of our property, the municipality and town of Yarmouth will be putting the airport on their exemption list. So we will not be billed, the airport will not be billed for municipal taxes, nor will the municipality have to forward that money to the airport to pay those taxes.
right,
So it will reduce your contribution, but it will also eliminate the money that you
income
get
Yes.
when the taxes are redistributed.
But it balances out.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
It's just,
It's
the only
in there.
difference is if the bill doesn't get paid, there's interest. That's the only difference. And it does change the way that it's accounted for, because the property taxes will disappear.
Right. Okay.
So that's the only,
So, if there's no questions, we'll ask for a motion to accept, or to approve, I guess.
I'll make the motion.
Seconded.
No questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded, carried. Bylaw number 38, Well Supply Lending Program Amendment. We discussed that at the last meeting. This is again ready for a motion, or is this the first reading?
It's not the first reading, it's not the second reading, it's in between.
It's in
So
between.
at the September 11th meeting, we presented it as first reading because we made suggestions. So what we wanted to do is before bringing it to second reading, which is October 9th, because we have to advertise at least 2 weeks
Oh,
before the
okay.
meeting.
Yes.
We wanted to give you an idea of what the changes would be, so that when we get, you can
Okay.
kind of see it. So
Okay,
if, I can go through them, the highlighted changes if you'd like, one by one. I'll do it and I won't take too much time and you can ask questions if you'd like. So on page 1, we made one small change, which was to the eligibility of the home, of the property owner. They, instead of, the way that it was worded was that they had to be, all of their municipal taxes had to be paid in full that year. So now we specify that to being on the property that they're requesting the well loan for.
okay.
So there are some property owners who have businesses and other type of properties that don't necessarily, won't necessarily qualify for the well loan. On page 3, we clarified the process a little bit of if a loan becomes default, or if the property owner becomes default on any payment. So the first is that we made sure that it was clear that the loan, if it becomes in default, would be treated as rates and taxes, which means that it would have the same interest rate, which is 16% instead of 3.5, and it would follow the same proceedings as municipal taxes for tax sale purposes. So if the outstanding balance would be over 2 years old, it would be possible to bring the property to tax sale because of the well loan. Also, if the property was ever sold, that well loan would have to be paid out, which is what we do for things like sewer. And the last amendment would be on page 3, which is to change the interest rate from 3% to 3.5. Those are the
Okay.
proposed changes which we will bring to the October 9th meeting for second reading.
So do we need a motion now to just,
No.
we don't need a motion on this one
No,
yet?
it was just for information, I guess, instead of
Okay, okay.
in conversation.
So are there any questions though on this? Like, people that are applying, they're aware of this, that if they were in default, that the interest rate is no longer 3.5%. It's the same as taxes, right? That's what you just said?
Yes.
So they're aware of this when they,
Yeah, we
it's in their contract, so they know that, okay, yeah.
Correct, it's in the regulation, and that's why we're making the change in the bylaws to make it even more clear in the documentation.
Okay.
So that when we explain it, it's the same
Yes,
documentation.
yes. Okay, so if there's no questions, so this will be ready for the second reading on the 9th.
Yeah.
Dangerous and unsightly premises cleanup relief. So we're looking, you're looking to, we don't have a, do we have a budget? Do we have a budget already in place for this? We did.
Well,
But,
yes, but what I'm looking for in this request for decision is more of your strategic vision for how that money is to be spent.
Okay,
That we have a budgeted amount is done. So this year, we budgeted $35,000. And that's up from last year's budget. And the range of budget for this type of work has gone from $7,000 a year to $35,000. So from our perspective, we have a variety of different reasons why properties become dangerous and or unsightly. And what staff is looking for is a little bit more direction from council around what your intentions might be around the dangerous and unsightly cleanups. So I can tell you what it is, and I can tell you what we've done. So what it is legislative, right? If the municipality requires a cleanup, the property owner must clean it. If they don't, we can clean it and we can bill them for it. Okay, that's the simple explanation of this type of work. It's never that simple, but that's how it works. So what happens is we have a budget for dangerous and unsightly cleanup, but more often than not, what would happen is if we require to pay for cleanup, it doesn't show as an expense, it shows as a part of their tax bill. So it becomes a receivable from that resident. So it doesn't necessarily show as an expense, even if we actually flow the money, right? So traditionally what has happened, and I can say accurately that if we've looked at 4 cleanups, and I mean, what I mean by cleanups is I'm also including demolition in those 4 examples. The demolition would have been of an old home that was replaced with a new one on site, a new mobile home on site. Another couple of demolitions would have been barns that were dilapidated that had to be taken down and pulled away. So in all of those instances, we incurred costs, and in all but if there were 5 of them, and I believe that's the right number, 4 of them we could not recover the cost of the demolition or the cleanup. There was one instance where there was a property in Wedgeport that burnt down, and it was a high value piece of land, and we were able to recover the cost of the cleanup, which wasn't a destruction, it was only a cleanup of that property, which was approximately $7,000. We were able to recover that in its entirety when it went to tax sale. Every other time these properties go to tax sale, one of 3 things ends up happening. We either get a bid, which is rare, or we don't, and then we bring it to the next year's tax sale. And then typically what would end up happening by the time the 3rd time comes around, we've reduced the opening bid requirement to not match the amount that we actually pay on the property. And we may or may not get that amount. And then the final part is we would go to tender, and somebody would put a very low number on a piece of paper to obtain that property, and the highest number wins. In pretty much every one of those cases, we've written off the work that we could not recover, either through the tax sale proceedings or other ones, for a variety of reasons, right? I mean, if the property's only worth $5,000 and you've demolished something on it for 10, right? And we're not in, the way that we sell these pieces of property is by auction. So it's not, we don't do appraisals. That's not what we do, right? So even the nature of how we sell these properties is unique. So that's a long story to tell everybody how it kind of works. What we see is situations where we might have $16,000, $17,000, $10,000 on properties, and we know it's not going to be paid. And so our practice, at least in one occasion, was to make an arrangement with the particular landowner or property owner to say that they can defer or postpone their taxes or the loan component of their taxes until they can, get past some of their other obligations and start paying us. But the reality is even if that happens, there's some people that are just physically or fiscally not able to pay. And what we would like to get from council is an understanding of what is your philosophy around dangerous and unsightly. We've had this conversation more than once where we say, well, on the one hand, it's the responsibility of the homeowner to keep their home clean, but on the other hand, there's an understanding that the beautification of a piece of property might be of interest to the entire community. So we in staff have had various conversations about this, and what we see is that there might be a way to utilize some of that budget to head some of this issue at the pass, rather than wait until a property goes to tax sale in order to potentially recover these costs. And so I guess the purpose of the information that's presented in this request is to A, showcase what the cost has been over the past years and what we might be facing moving forward, and how do we deal with some of these older accounts that are still outstanding. What kind of liberty or what kind of process would you like to put in place so that we know exactly what you want to do with these properties, and whether you want to be, whether you want to be in the position to help financially or not.
Right. But the 35,000 that we had allotted for in the budget wasn't that to be used for that type? I'm just wondering why we have to make a motion to move 20,000. I thought that was kind of automatic, that the 35,000 was going to be to be used towards demolition or cleanup or whatever, right? I know that we bill them. I knew that, but I wasn't sure what the 35,000, and that should be automatic, that okay, it's $35,000 there. Now you can move some of that money to release it, you're probably not gonna get it. That's basically not what it's for.
So how it was used in the past is that it would give us the room to write off accounts.
Right.
But we never had permission, we don't have permission right
No.
now to apply any form of relief to this work at the time it happens.
Okay.
The only time that we have permission to relieve that amount is when it goes to tax sale.
Right.
And then we've determined that it can't be recovered.
Okay.
So technically, it's the same amount of money. I'm not asking for new money.
No.
What I'm asking is permission to develop policy so that we can address these and not put people in the position where they know they can't pay it.
That's right.
And put them through, their version of financial,
Kind of like the first step instead of the last step.
Right. The last step will happen.
For sure.
But the thing is we have examples where, there's one in particular that has a $17,000 or $16,000 amount owing. Well, they still live there, right? So like council, in order to apply the law and only the law, could technically say, look, you haven't made any arrangements to pay. In 2 years, your house is going up for sale. Well, this person and his family is not going to have a place to live.
Mhm.
So I don't think that's the intention of council.
No.
You know,
No,
I mean,
it's
in
not.
fact, in some cases, we've gone in and spent money to increase the safety of the resident in the home, not decrease the safety of the resident in home. So I know that's not your intent.
No.
So I'm trying to bring this up and say, okay, well, how far do you want us to go in terms of like do you want us to build a process that will allow people to apply for a relief of some sort? Obviously pending MGA approval, pending, we have to make sure that we're following the law, but what I'm suggesting is that there might be another way.
Okay. Councilor Wong.
I feel like a broken record on this topic. It's a darn if you do, darn if you don't situation. I've mulled over for some time now. What's right and what's wrong. On one hand, you have residents saying my tax dollars shouldn't be going to beautify someone else's property, whereas there's other residents that may tell you, get it cleaned up. I don't care what you do, fix that problem, right? So it's something I've been listening to residents for some time. It's something I've been almost kept awake up at night, just what is the right situation here. And after 6 years of being here and listening to every individual situation, you realize there are cases that will not get cleaned up. There's often different issues. We've all heard of them, different reasoning why one property, be it dangerous or be it unsightly, why it won't be cleaned up. But usually when they get to the point where we hear about them, there's a reason. And I think the fact we budgeted 35,000 this year is a step forward. The fact that we made a committee is a step forward. And to me, it just sounds prudent, the suggested motion here, that it would, in my eyes, assist staff, basically assist staff in just being more efficient and proactive. Just the situation our CEO was just speaking of. I mean, we're not in the business of evicting people, and that may be the case if we actually followed our own laws, right? So clearly we need some sort of change, but also I think it'd be prudent to be cautious about it, right? Because it's not a free-for-all that you don't ever, in my opinion, I don't ever want it to be taken as, well, don't clean up your yard because the municipality, we definitely don't want to get into that business. But there's just isolated cases, and I think we need to develop policy, and I think this is a good way of doing it. So I'm going to make the suggested motion that's in front of us here on the agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Contraminded? Carried.
So for the residents that are watching, the motion is that the council is considering an amount to relief rather than write-off.
Right.
And that will be done by policy. So the first thing to do is to develop a policy. Staff will develop a policy, bring it back to you. Once you approve that policy, then you'll be able to.
Yes. And the relief is not intended to show that we would pay for the entire amount, is that it, or it could be? It depends on the policy that we write.
It would depend on the policy that you are looking to pass. The policy that we intend to present to you will not be 100% subsidy. It would be, I think you have to do it in a shared environment.
Right.
Obviously, not everybody would qualify. You'd have to develop, rules of qualification. It's obviously intended for people who are having some financial difficulty, so there could be some financial pre-qualifying information, much like our
Okay.
low-income policy might have. So obviously, you've given us permission to develop this policy. These would be only preliminary thoughts at this time.
Okay, good. Other business, the UNSM interim resolution report. That was sent to us, well, I received it a while back. I know there was a couple meetings, UNSM now, well, it's not UNSM, NSFM, they used to bring all kinds of resolutions to the floor, and now they limit those with the most important ones. Now, if you read the report, there's a whole bunch of recommended resolutions. But I saw a lot there that I would think would be good. I know probably we can't have them all, but there's a lot of them, they're not really resolutions, so I'm not sure if those are all going to be brought up or not. They're for discussion, basically. Because there's no real resolution, there's no whereas, and it's, so they've had meetings. Do we still send, can we send our priorities up, or has that been done? We did that one year. And is it for this one here?
I do believe it's for this year.
It's for this year?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, because we missed the meetings. The meetings were not around here anyway, but there was one yesterday, and the next meeting is in Sydney or somewhere, so. Anyway, so really, this is, we can't do any more with this if we've done what we had to do, so.
Yeah. I believe that we had sent, I recall very specifically Councillor Surratt insisting that extended producer responsibility be one of the priorities. And there seemed to be a couple more, I can't recall, but,
Yeah.
but I see EPRs on that list, so.
Okay, so they're there, but I think what they're asking here, with all the recommendations that were sent, only a few are going to be chosen, right? So I think that's what they're wanting. Out of the ones that are there now, which ones do we think are the ones that should come up to NSFM, right? So I don't know if you just want to leave it like that. I mean, probably if they've had their meetings, they're getting to the point where they know which ones are going to be, decision has been made on which ones are going to come up, so. So we don't want to do any more with this? If not, we'll move on to correspondence. Department of Municipal Affairs, Ferry Terminal Funding, the Mariner Center Marketing Committee minutes, Mariner Center Management Authority minutes, Rural Nova Scotia Healthcare Working Group, Yarmouth and Area Chamber of Commerce, Recruitment and Retention of Family Physicians. Are there any of those that anybody wants to? The one about recruitment, looks like they want to get involved. There's no committee at this point that I'm aware of. I mean, there's been talk about reforming the committee. It's in the 3 municipal units, but I don't think anything has come up with that at this point.
Not this.
No, there's no committee that's been struck since.
No, we had the Health Human Resources Committee to which I was chair, but after the NSHA,
Yes.
after the
changes, yeah.
amalgamation or whatever, we lost a key person as a resource locally, and now that person's out of the valley, and quite frankly, there've been a lot of changes in the way recruitment and retention are done. So it kind of took us out of the loop a little bit, but I think it's starting to come back because some of our, obviously we're having a retention and recruitment issue in Nova Scotia we've had for a while, and I think now it's kind of coming to a head.
Yes. But I guess all that they're asking is they would like to be part of it if the committee's struck again, so
That would be useful.
I think so too.
There's not just a shortage of physicians, there's an awful lot of shortage of nurses, big time, I know one for sure that, she's been called from her regular job that she was off, and, asked her to go to Shelburne. She went twice. Called and asked to go to Digby. Went twice, to help out. It's, it's a big thing with physicians, but the nurses also, they're getting, baby boomers, there's a lot of them that are getting ready to, and have retired. There's a bunch of them that retired here a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And they're all back working. They're all back there. Most of them. So it's crucial.
Yeah.
Anyways.
The healthcare system as a whole is in trouble right now in Nova Scotia. It's as simple as that. And
Yeah.
I've said it here before, and I'll say it again. And I keep bringing it up. I'll bring it up once more. Same as this ambulance and that's supposed to be stationed in Pubnico. That was supposed to be a priority base. Myself, my fellow councillor here watch that base all the time when we drive by. And that we always look in, and there's a lot of, my fellow councillor over there, and there's a lot of times you'll see no ambulance, no paramedics at that base. A couple of weeks ago, I hauled in there one evening, and that or drove by, I should say, one evening, there was an ambulance in the base, everything closed up tight, no paramedics to run it, and one of these days, and that, it can go on record, one of these days, in rural Nova Scotia somewheres, somebody waiting for the paramedics to arrive is going to be too late.
Yep. It's gonna happen. Okay.
Okay. Well, the next item, usually we have that later, but it's the topics for next meeting. Usually that's just before we adjourn, but anybody have any topics to bring up for next? Or notice of motion? We have financial requests, community grants. We have East Pubnico Fire Department.
Yeah,
That's yours.
I'd like to give $500 to the East Pubnico Fire Department to purchase a washer. The washer has been purchased.
Okay, they want help.
So I'd like to move that.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Contrary, carried. East Side Community Center.
I'd like to move to give $500 to the East Side Community Center to help to purchase they call it a food cleanup trolley. This trolley is used, it's like a cart, you go around cleaning the tables when they have banquets and things like that, and, or other functions that can use them. I'd like to move $500 for that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Contraminded? Carried. We have one more that's not on the list here, and it's for Nikhil, and that would be,
For $500, and it's for furnishings and equipment. That-
I'll second that.
moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Contraminded? Carried. Which brings us to question period. Questions, anybody? You want to speak to somebody after? Okay. Any questions on the line?
I have a
Nothing?
question for
You have a
online.
question? Yeah.
Online, can they see the agenda or in open? Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
link right at the top of the,
Off the stream.
Move to adjourn?
We're adjourned.